Welcome to the Secrets of the Bible channel. The most mysterious beings in the Bible. Number 1, Nephilim, Genesis 6, 1 through 4. Now it came about, when mankind began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of mankind were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit will not remain with man forever, because he is also flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in the daughters of mankind, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. The Nephilim are figures mentioned in the Bible, particularly in the book of Genesis, who have captured the imagination of many for centuries. Despite their brief mention, the Nephilim have sparked numerous theories and interpretations regarding their identity, origins, and significance in ancient history and biblical theology. One interpretation of the Nephilim posits them as literal giants, being of immense stature and strength. God did not intend for the human race to remain in this rebellious state indefinitely. This means that our rejection of God has reached a point of no return. God will not woo us indefinitely. There will come a time when he says no more. The Bible gives us hints at a world that has deviated far from what God intended. So as Noah builds his ark, a massive vessel about 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high, you can feel that something really bad is about to happen. Let us put Noah's ark size into perspective with things we're familiar with today. Noah gathers his family and pairs all living creatures as instructed by God. The ark turns into a sign of safety and hope during the flood. Then the rains come. It's not just a heavy downpour, it's like the heavens themselves have opened up. Water covers the earth, higher than the mountains. Every living thing that moved on the earth perished. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. Genesis 7:21-23. After 40 days and 40 nights, the rain stops. The waters eventually subside, and the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. Now think of this like parking your car on a big tall hill after a massive storm. But instead of a car, it's a massive boat. And instead of a hill, it's a whole group of big mountains. Noah and his family step out into a new world. God makes a covenant with Noah, promising never to destroy the earth with a flood again, marked by the rainbow in the sky. You would think this would be the last time we read about the Nephilim or giants, but after this, we see various instances. The exploration of Canaan. And it appears that the fallen angels commit their sin. However, it is likely that it occurred to a much lesser extent than before the flood. We go to Numbers 13:33. Here we meet a new set of characters: Moses, the Israelite spies, and the inhabitants of Canaan, including the descendants of Anak, who are linked to the Nephilim. Who exactly were these descendants of Anak? The Bible introduces them during the story of Moses sending 12 spies to explore the land of Canaan. The spies come back with a startling report. We saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. This verse suggests that the descendants of Anak were related to the Nephilim, known for their great size and strength. Moses, leading the Israelites out of Egypt, sends spies to scout the promised land. Hold on, didn't we just say the Nephilim were wiped out in the flood? In the Old Testament, giant is most commonly referred to by the word Rephaim throughout the entirety of the Old Testament's narrative. The Rephaim serve as a fascinating and significant recurring motif. Where does the Bible mention Rephaim? The Rephaim are first mentioned in Genesis 14. The Rephaim, along with other large people, are also mentioned in Deuteronomy 2:20-21. Deuteronomy 2:20-21. It is also regarded as the land of the Rephaim because the Rephaim previously lived in it. But the Ammonites called them Zamzammim. A people as great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim. But the Lord destroyed them before them, and they dispossessed them and settled in their place. The name Rephaim, which literally means terrible ones, gives us an indication of the intimidating and fearsome nature of these individuals. This is not the only time we see these giants after the flood. In Deuteronomy 3, there's an interesting story about King Og of Bashan, a giant man. Og is referred to as the last of the Rephaim in Deuteronomy 3:11 and later in the book of Numbers and Joshua. Rephaim is a Hebrew word for giants. The king Israel had to deal with was King Og of Bashan, who sent his entire army against Israel. The Israelites then marched towards Bashan, where King Og confronted them at Edrei. Because of Og's reputation, the Israelites were terrified. "Do not be afraid of him, for I have delivered him into your hands along with his entire army and his land," God assured Moses. The book of Deuteronomy includes a narrative of a conflict that occurred between forces led by Moses and those led by Og. According to the biblical account, Og was the ruler of 60 different walled cities, all of which were taken by the Israelites. Israel slayed the entire forces and conquered all 60 cities in the kingdom of Og, which had the same tall walls as Sihon. Only when God chose to hand over an enemy to his people, even strong fortified cities were no match for the enemy. In addition to this, he was a very large man and slept in a bed made of iron that was 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide, 5 feet long and 6 feet wide. The inclusion of this detail draws attention to Og's massive stature. A man in need of this sized bed was most likely tall. Israel destroyed the entire population and took control of all 60 cities in Og's kingdom, which had the same high walls as Sihon. When God decided to hand over an enemy to his people, high-walled cities were no match. Later, at the city of Jericho, the most spectacular demonstration of that truth would occur. According to Deuteronomy 3:11, Og was a descendant of the Rephaims, indicating a man of great stature or giant. His colossal bed had become famous and no doubt had been saved as a memento. Joshua 12:4, New American Standard Bible. And the territory of Og, king of Bashan, one of the remnant of the Rephaim who lived at Asheroth at Edrei. After this, we then see another giant. The most well-known giant in history is Goliath from the New American Standard Bible. He was a champion from the Philistine camp who fought as an armored charioteer. He was dressed what we call male code. The Philistines warmed up by donning a large canvas-like undergarment with overlapping bronze ringlets. From shoulder to knee, this coat of mail shielded the wearer from the enemy's weapon. Body armor of this size and type weighed 50 shekels of bronze, which equates to between 175 and 200 pounds in modern terms. The armor only included the coat of mail. Goliath, on the other hand, wore a bronze helmet, bronze leggings, greaves to protect his shins, and carried a bronze javelin or spear slung between his shoulders. Was Goliath a Nephilim? Some scholars believe that Goliath the Gittite, a Gath resident, belonged to a race known as the Nephilim. Other experts argue that Goliath was a Rephite because the Nephilim were destroyed in the Great Flood during Noah's time. Only Noah's family survived. Some scholars believe the Philistines descended from the Anakim. Goliath's champion status is enhanced by the fact that Gath was an ancient Anakim stronghold. Some scientists believe Goliath has identifiable family tree, implying an autosomal dominant inheritance, which causes familial acromegaly or gigantism, the relations of Goliath. There are also other giants mentioned in 2 Samuel 21:15 through 22, and 1 Chronicles 24 through 8, who were related to Goliath in the Bible. This event occurred when David was old, 2 Samuel 21. There was a war at Gath again, where there was a man of great stature who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot, 24 in number. He also was a descendant of giants. And when he taunted and defied Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shammai, David's brother, killed him. These 4 warriors were descended from the giant in Gath, and they fell by the hands of David and his servants. Since Goliath was from Gath, these were Goliath's sons or brothers. How did they survive the flood? Here's the big question. If the Nephilim were around before the great flood and the flood wiped out all but Noah and his family, how could the descendants of Anak, which are linked to the Nephilim, be around after the flood? When we consider the flood, we read, "He blotted out every living thing that was upon the face of the ground." Genesis 7:23, this verse makes it clear that the flood was incredibly comprehensive in its destruction. So, how could the Nephilim have survived such an event? There are different opinions to this. Some suggest that the Nephilim mentioned afterwards in Genesis were a new group, unrelated to those before the flood. Others propose that the term Nephilim might not refer to a specific lineage, but rather a title or description given to giants or mighty warriors across different eras. It is also possible that after the flood, the demons mated with human females again, resulting in more Nephilim. It's even possible that some Nephilim characteristics were passed down through the lineage of one of Noah's daughters-in-law. Another perspective comes from the book of Numbers 13:33, where the Nephilim are mentioned again long after the flood. So did the Nephilim survive the flood, or were the post-flood giants a different group altogether? As we think about this mystery, it reminds us of the many interesting stories and people in the Bible. It makes us want to learn more, ask questions, and be curious. Based on a few theories that Bible scholars and enthusiasts consider, some suggest that Nephilim might not have referred to a specific group of people, but rather was a term used to describe any large and mighty warriors. So, how do these pieces fit together? On one hand, we have Noah and his family, the sole human survivors of the flood. On the other, centuries later, there's a mention of the Nephilim, or their descendants in Canaan. Flood, but continuous sin. So why did God send the flood if he knew sin would still be around after it? Let's dig into this using Genesis 6:1-7 as our guide. The Nephilim and the Great Flood are more than just ancient stories. They offer valuable lessons in spiritual warfare that are relevant to us today. Just like the Nephilim were part of the physical and spiritual problems of that time, we too face challenges that aren't just physical, but spiritual. The union of the sons of God and the daughters of human resulted in chaos, showing how stepping away from God's path can lead to serious consequences. In the same light, when we go against God's will for our lives, it can result in a significant impact on our spiritual lives by relying on God's power. So when we read about the descendants of Anak being linked to the Nephilim, it opens up a whole world of questions and interpretations. It's like piecing together a puzzle with some pieces missing. In other words, the Bible invites us to explore, to wonder, and to seek deeper understanding. The flood story, which talks about the mysterious Nephilim, fallen angels, and how evil had engulfed the earth, is a really powerful story about how people are judged, how they can be saved, and how good people stay strong. It makes us ponder, how do we remain faithful in a world that often seems to be drifting away from moral and spiritual anchors? Number 6, Behemoth, the mighty beast of the earth. Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength it has in its loins. What power in the muscles of its belly. Its tail sways like a cedar. The sinews of its thighs are close knit. Its bones are tubes of bronze. Its limbs like rods of iron. It ranks first among the works of God, yet its maker can approach it with his sword. The hills bring their produce, and all the wild animals play nearby. Under the lotus plants it lies, hidden among the reeds in the marsh. The lotuses conceal it in their shadow. The poplars by the stream surround it. A raging river does not alarm it. It is secure, though the Jordan should surge against its mouth. Can anyone capture it by the eyes or trap it and pierce its nose? Behemoth is a mysterious and formidable creature mentioned in the Bible. particularly in the book of Job, where it is described as a mighty beast of the earth. The description of Behemoth in Job 40:15-24 paints a vivid picture of a powerful and untamable creature whose strength and stature inspire awe and wonder. While the identity of Behemoth remains a subject of debate and speculation, its portrayal in the biblical narrative serves as a symbol of God's sovereignty over creation and the awe-inspiring complexity of the natural world. The passage in Job begins with God challenging Job to consider the greatness and majesty of Behemoth, saying, "Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox." Job 40:15 NIV. This introductory statement emphasizes Behemoth's creation by God and its role as a creature of the earth, similar to domesticated livestock such as oxen. The description of Behemoth continues with details of its physical attributes and behavior. Its tail sways like a cedar. The sinews of its thighs are close-knit. Its limbs like iron rods, and its bones are bronze tubes. Job 40:17-18 NIV. These vivid imagery highlights Behemoth's immense size, strength, and durability, comparing its tail to the mighty cedar tree and its bones and limbs to metal. Furthermore, Behemoth's diet and habit are described. It ranks first among the works of God, yet its maker can approach it with its sword. All the wild animals play close by, and the hills send it their produce. Job 40:19-20 NIV. This passage suggests that Behemoth is the pinnacle of God's creation, surpassing all other creatures in strength and significance. Despite its power, Behemoth remains subject to God's authority, as evidenced by the mention of God approaching it with his sword. The passage concludes with a reflection on Behemoth's unassailable nature and the impossibility of capturing or subduing. Can anyone capture it by the eyes or trap it and pierce its nose? Job 40:24. If this rhetorical question emphasizes Behemoth's untamable and uncontrollable nature, highlighting its status as a creature beyond human comprehension and dominion. Physical attributes. The description of Behemoth in Job 40 emphasizes its physical attributes, including its immense size, strength, and durability. Behemoth's tail is likened to a cedar tree, its bones to tubes of bronze and its limbs to rods of iron. Job 40:17-18. These descriptions evoke a sense of grandeur and power, suggesting that Behemoth is a creature of unparalleled strength and stature. Herbivorous diet. Behemoth is described as feeding on grass like an ox. Job 40:15, indicating that it's an herbivorous creature. This detail contrasts with other creatures mentioned in the book of Job, such as the Leviathan, which is described as a carnivorous sea monster. Behemoth's herbivorous diet suggests a gentler and more peaceful nature, in contrast to the ferocity and aggression associated with carnivorous predators. Significance and symbolism attached to Behemoth. The story of Behemoth in the Bible shows us how powerful and amazing God is. It reminds us of how God created everything with great variety and beauty. When we think about Behemoth, we should be amazed and give praise to God, because it represents his strength, his ability to create wonderful things, and how far beyond our understanding he is. It's a call for all Christians to look at God's creation and respond with wonder and love, recognizing his mighty power and the greatness of what he has made. Biblical references to Behemoth in the Bible. The term Behemoth appears only in the book of Job, specifically in Job 40:15-24. This passage provides the most detailed description of Behemoth and is the primary biblical reference to this enigmatic creature. Here is the relevant passage. Job 40:15-24, Amplified Bible. Behold now Behemoth, which I created as well as you. He eats grass like an ox. See now, his strength is in his loins, and his power is in the muscles and sinews of his belly. He sways his tail like a cedar. The tendons of his thighs are twisted and knit together like a rope. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs are like bars of iron. He is the first in magnitude and power of the works of God. Only he who made him can bring near his sword to master him. Surely the mountains bring him food, and all the wild animals play there. He lies down under the lotus plants, in the hidden shelter of the reeds in the marsh. The lotus plants cover him with their shade. The willows of the brook surround him. If a river rages and overflows, he does not tremble. He is confident, though the Jordan River swells and rushes against his mouth. Can anyone capture him when he is on watch, or pierce his nose with barbs to trap him? Numbers. Angel of the Lord. Who is this angel? There are numerous accounts of angels briefly manifesting themselves in the physical realm and making face-to-face appearances with people who God was actively working with at the time. These accounts can be found all throughout the Bible. When looking at the scriptures in the Old Testament that describe human interaction with angels, there's one being that stands out above all the others for several different reasons. We first meet this angel in the Hagar story. Sarah, the wife of Abraham, had an Egyptian girl named Hagar who worked for her as a slave. The book of Genesis chapter 16 is where the majority of Hagar's information can be found. After God had made his presence known to Abram, the promise of a land of his own, and an inheritance, 10 years passed, and the couple still did not have a child. Because Sarah could not wait any longer, she decided to take matters into her own hands and gave her maid to her husband. Abram obeyed her instructions, and as a result, Hagar became pregnant. Sarah became envious of the younger girl when she started flaunting her expanding waistline. This was despite the fact that Sarah was the one who got them into this adulterous situation in the first place. In anger, Sarah started treating Hagar harshly. Genesis 16:7-14, Amplified Bible. But the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness, on the road to Egypt by the way of Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, where did you come from, and where are you going? And she said, I am running away from my mistress Sarai. The angel of the Lord said to her, Go back to your mistress and submit humbly to her authority. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants, so that they will be too many to count. The angel of the Lord continued, Behold, you are with child, and you will bear a son, and you shall name him Ishmael. God hears, because the Lord has heard and paid attention to your persecution suffering. Ishmael will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against every man, continually fighting, and every man's hand against him, and he will dwell in defiance of all his brothers. Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. You are God who sees. For she said, Have I not even here in the wilderness remained alive after seeing him who sees me with understanding and compassion? Therefore the well was called Beer Lahai Roi, well of the living one who sees me. It is between Kadesh and Bered. The angel of the Lord had a physical presence and communicated with Hagar in the same way that two people would communicate with one another. There is no indication that this was merely a spiritual impression or a voice carried on the breeze, in our opinion. The angel of the Lord was physically present with Hagar, and that person was present with them both at the same time. This is the very first time that the angel of the Lord is mentioned in the Holy Scriptures. It was not Noah, Enoch, or Abram who saw him for the first time. The first person that the angel of the Lord appeared to was Hagar. The angel of the Lord told her to repent. If she changed her direction, there was an inherent promise. Obey me and I will protect you. Jesus didn't exactly tell Hagar to go back to an abusive household. He made an implied promise of protection. The angel of the Lord found her there and comforted her, telling her to return to her mistress and giving her a prophecy concerning her son. The angel of the Lord also appeared to Abraham in order to save Isaac. Genesis 22:10-18, and Abraham reached out with his hand and took his knife to slaughter his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here I am. He said, do not reach out your hand against the boy, and do not do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." Then Abraham raised his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him was a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering in the place of his son. And Abraham named that place "The Lord will provide," as it is said to this day, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, "By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, your only son. Indeed, I will greatly bless you, and I will greatly multiply your seed as the stars of the heavens and as the sand which is on the seashore. And your seed shall possess the gate of their enemies. And in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice." After this, Abraham acknowledged that God had provided for the keeping of his word, and he named the location Jehovah-Jireh, which means "the Lord will provide." While Abraham's weakness of faith is chronicled in Genesis 18:22, God did not reject him or punish him for that immaturity. However, God did give him opportunities for growth, and then put him through tests so that he could demonstrate the growth that he had experienced. Abraham discovered that God is faithful, and even if we do not know how God is going to keep his word, we can be certain that he is faithful and that he will keep his word.